We're going to talk about mankind, the law of God, and degeneration of mankind, degeneration of the earth, and degeneration of the animal kingdom. That's our subject tonight. I'm reading from a commentary on the book of Exodus. Well, it's on the whole 5 books of Moses, Kyle and Delish. It covers hundreds of years of teachings from the Jewish and the what we might call Christian backgrounds. We're going to talk about degeneration. Degeneration means that it gets worse, not better. The idea of mankind is that mankind is subject to his environment, and that's what makes him the way he is. Now we know that that is not true, because we had Adam in the garden and Eve in the garden, and everything was absolutely perfect, and yet they went the wrong way. And mankind, Adam lived over 900 years. We don't know how long Eve lived, but she probably lived 900 to 1,000 years. Mankind, from the time of Abraham, etc., this time, they began to have shorter lifetimes. In the history of mankind, we know of 2 or 3 people that lived over 200 years old outside of the biblical patriarchs. There was one Chinese man that was supposed to have lived 300 years. There was an Englishman that lived 175 years and was in good health, and the king was so excited about this man that was 175 years old. They brought him and traveled him to the king, and he looked at all this stuff around here, and he told this man was verified that he was over 175 years old. The king was just amazed with it. He had been a farmer under the kings for 175 years. Shortly after he went back home, he died. They said he died of shock. He was taken out of his environment. When mankind and the animal kingdom, when they were in the garden, everything was beautiful. The animal kingdom got along. The animal kingdom got along all the way up until the flood. And after the flood, then animals began to eat each other. Animals changed. God put the fear of mankind in the animals because mankind was now killing and eating animals. They did not eat flesh before. After that, mankind went downhill. Mankind degenerated. The earth degenerated. The animal kingdom degenerated. Again, I forgot to get my glasses, or my magnifying glass, so I could read the Hebrew better here, and some Greek, because they printed in half the size of the other printing. Today, we see mankind, sometimes children are children until they're 50 and 60 and 70 years old and never grow up. That's degeneration. When I was young, you were expected to be a man and a woman at 18 years old. You were expected to be a man and a woman and be able to take care of yourself. That was expected in society, expected that. You go back 300 years, you go back into the Jewish culture, and a Jewish boy became a man at 12 years old, and they began looking for a wife for him so he would not be having any sexual temptations or anything. Get them married and get them together, and they take out their sexual excitement with each other in the act of marriage. That was the idea. The boys followed in their father's occupations. They just did that. Sometimes businesses were handed down to father and son for 1,000 years. People were expected to be morally pure, whether they were infidels or whatever they were. They were supposed to be upright. Drunkenness was not looked upon as something okay, or drugs or anything like that. It was not okay to be an alcoholic, and it was not okay to be a drug addict. Today, this is part of society. There were laws set down, and mankind was expected to obey those laws. Today, we live in an outlaw society. Right is wrong and wrong is right. How do you know what right is? It's all what we might call relative. Relative. Degeneration. We raise our children sometimes to be children until they're 50, 60 years old. That's not the way it should be. You teach them to be adults. Hopefully when they're 18 years old, like it was expected in my society. That was expected. If you weren't, something was wrong with you. And you were made to, they ostracized you because something was wrong with you. It wasn't okay to be a child at 25 or 30 or 40 years old. It wasn't okay. You were not supposed to be a burden to your parents at all. Marilyn talks about her grandfather. When the kids got to be 16, 18 years old, they were pushed out of the house. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, say loud. Say it loudly. Did your grandfather push the kids out when they're 16, 18 years old?
Yes.
Okay. Because he expected them to be adults. We expect this. My two sons, when they were 18 years old, they could take care of themselves. I expected that out of them. I told them, I expect you to be this way. If you don't, I'll beat you up and make another one. Kill you and make another one. You teach them to, that's what they're supposed to do in society. Animals. Even mankind has malaligned the animal kingdom. Why, turkeys. You know, turkeys were native to America, by the way. That's where they were native. They came from here. Of course, if you're listening to me in Africa or whatever, United Kingdom or Australia or whatever, they weren't there. They were here. And you know that they have hybrid those turkeys so much in some ways to have great big breasts that they can't even breed on their own. They have to have artificial insemination to breed these turkeys like that. They have done that with cattle, they have done that with chickens, they have done that with goats and sheep and everything. I've always raised Old English game chickens. I love them. I just love to see the beauty of them. And they're the chickens that God created. They're the ones He created. They crow 12, 3, 6, and 9, 24 hours a day. That's God's clock. That's what they do. And yet we've taken those, we've made them lay eggs, and by the way, a game chicken sometimes can live to be over 30 years old. And so you take the Cornish, you take the Leghorns, you take the Rhode Island Reds and everything like that, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, and they're done, they're shot. What God made is always better. Do you know that? What God made is always better. Cattle that cripple themselves. I remember in my lifetime, a quarter horse used to be a quarter horse. It was a working animal. And then they started showing halter classes and everything. They only did with halter. I bought a beautiful quarter horse one time, and I made a mistake not looking at his feet too close. The old quarter horses, when I was growing up, when I was very young, they had large feet and large legs. Their legs were strong. This was a beautiful bay quarter horse, but his feet, he just didn't have any feet under him. He was a good cutting horse. He was you could rope off him, or you could do whatever, but you had to have him on good level ground. His abilities, his natural abilities had been bred out because he was a halter class. It was the beauty, the conformation, everything. He had Monday morning sickness all the time. That's where you take them out and work them, and they work them so much every day, and if you give them a day off, the next day when you go, they just pour sweat off of them. And they die sometimes, they tie up. The sweat is because they're in tremendous pain. Their natural abilities were bred out of them because they wanted something pretty. Pretty is as pretty does. One of my good friends said, pretty is as pretty does. The earth is degeneration. It's degenerating, isn't it? The earth is degenerating. I remember in history, I didn't go back this far. I'm old, but I'm not this old, okay? But when the Europeans came to America, now America was already groomed. There was already great gardens. They had farmers here. They had grown tomatoes, corn, all kinds of things. There was a great plantation in this country when the white man came here, okay? And American Indians smoked tobacco, a wild tobacco. And the Europeans took it back home and they were sniffing it up their nose with snuff. They were chewing on it. They were smoking it. They were doing all kinds of stuff. And it made this stuff really toxic. It was not the Indian tobacco. Well, they came back over here and they brought tobacco back with them. And when they brought tobacco back here, they brought a degenerating factor with them. They brought earthworms. There weren't any real earthworms here in this country until then, and it changed the whole ecology of the earth in America. In 1491, there were 150 million inhabitants of North, Meso, and South America. 150 million, the most populated place in the world, and there was no disease. But over in Europe, we had the Columbian Exchange. We're talking about degeneration. They blamed the syphilis epidemic in Europe on the American Indians. They said they brought syphilis from America. That's not true. They had a form of syphilis in South America that was, you don't know you had it. It's what you call a sexually transmitted disease. In Europe, they had leper colonies. Now, there's a form of syphilis in Europe that was so severe, it was like leprosy. It just ate your nose, your ears off of your mouth, and everything. It was just horrible. Your hands would be like leprosy. But it was syphilis. They went in there and turned the leper colonies out, but also the Catholic Church was conscripting soldiers. And the pay of the soldiers was not coming from the Catholic Church. Whatever you could steal, rob, anything you did, whether you raped and pillaged, it was okay because you had what we call forgiveness of sins. You had forgiveness of sins. Whatever you did, you were doing it for the kingdom of God, so it was not sin. But they went in and they raped some of these women that were in these leper colonies that didn't look so bad yet. And then they spread syphilis into America and all over Europe from that. Degeneration. When God told Israel to go into the promised land, He told them to go in there in some places and kill every man, woman, child, dog, and cat, sheep and cow, because they were infected with this syphilis and venereal diseases. Degeneration. Degeneration of the animal kingdom. Degeneration of the earth. When the Anglo-Saxons came to America, when they came in, they started building farms and they started growing this hybrid tobacco. They could go in and settle a farm and plow the area and everything that had been growing corn and yams and potatoes and things for hundreds of years. And the Indians would rotate the crops, and not only that, they would fertilize the ground. But these settlers came in, and they started growing tobacco, and within 5 to 10 years, the land would be completely depleted of any nutrients, and so they'd have to go and move a house and plant more ground, and they kept on eating up, degenerating the soil. One thing that they learned in the early 1900s and late 1800s was crop rotation. Crop rotation. This crop will deplete the minerals in the soil this way. So you grow this one for 1 or 2 years, and then you rotate it into something else that puts those nutrients back in the ground, that kills natural, what we call genetic parasites in the ground. And you do this. But the Bible said, way back here, where we're going into the law, it said to sow the ground for 6 years and let it rest for the 7th year. And the 7th year was to replenish the ground and regenerate the ground. And not only that, but all the wild animals of the field would go and they could harvest this, and they would have food to eat. The poor man would go and have food to eat. And the rich man was taxed 1/7. 1 out of every 70 years was not his to have in that land. And if he bought up somebody else's land, he had to give them back to him a certain amount of time. But look what we have in the world today. We have children that are 50 years old. We have children that never grow up. I didn't see that in my early life. I didn't see that. It was not normal. And if it was happening, you didn't look upon them as, oh, poor child. They were wrong. Something was wrong with their life. They needed to turn it around. They needed to do something. It wasn't not accepted in society, but today is an accepted thing. I remember when I was pastoring a church east of Bakersfield, California. I went out into the neighborhoods and I saw mothers living off of welfare. They'd have all the children that they could have, and they'd live off of their welfare checks. And they go out and gamble the money away, they go out and drink the money away, and they had boyfriends here and there and whatever. It was all helter-skelter, degeneration of society. And we caused that through the welfare systems. We caused it. The American Indian was a very proud race. A boy, by the time he was 12 years old, would expect to be a man. If he wasn't a man, he was looked down upon. Now, there are children among the Indian tribes, men, that never grow up. They're living in a welfare state. They were supposed to be wards of the state, and so they've made them a degenerated society. The society is degenerated because of the greed, because they wanted the land, and so they were going to put these Indians someplace and let them live off of their commodities and everything. You go back in the North and South Dakota, Minnesota, and areas back in there, and you'll find adult Indian men living to be 35 and 40 years old and dying of diabetes and all types of sicknesses, sin-related. Drunks all of their life. And that was caused. That was caused. They took a proud people and turned them into wards of the state. Degeneration of society, degeneration of thought, degeneration of the earth. We have an administration in there right now that is trying to do away with gasoline and fossil fuel and all of that, and I think we ought to use it all up safely. God put it there as a gift to you. That is a gift of God to you. God put it in the ground. Let's look how God did. In eternity past, when there were dinosaurs and everything there, the earth became formless and void. After that, Satan destroyed it, and all of that dinosaur and vegetation life that was on the pre-Adamic world was turned into fossil fuel. Satan destroyed it, but God overcome him by his eternal purpose and unpreventable progress. He gave the gift of fossil fuels to man. Of course, mankind, and everything that he does, it does it in excess, doesn't it? I remember in the 50s and 60s in Los Angeles, you couldn't hardly breathe. And Marilyn worked down there in the telephone, or California, or what was it? They called it Bell Telephone, I guess it was. And up there in the offices where she lived, you couldn't hardly open the windows because of the fumes from the gasoline. Now they have really changed it a lot. It's changed because they did things to take care of that. Solar is good. Wind power is good. Windmills, or all this is good. We've learned how to take care of society, but mankind will never repair the earth. We will go into wars and wars and wars, and I want to tell you something. Climate change is caused by mankind many times. In the Roman wars and the Greek wars, and all the of the pollution that they were burning down cities and everything caused so much dust in the air and smoke in the air that it changed the weather. The Napoleonic Wars, the same thing happened again. World War I, the same thing happened again. It changed the weather. The Civil War changed the weather. World War II changed the weather because of the corruption and degeneration of mankind wanting to kill each other. Is there a reason for the whole world to go at war and kill thousands, tens of thousands of people and destroy the earth at the same time? The oceans have been poisoned by mercury that was spilled in the ocean during these conflicts. Now you can't eat, you can only eat so much tuna, etc., 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 because it's got too much mercury and arsenic in it because of these problems, degeneration. The law of Moses sets down laws. We haven't got to it yet, we're talking about it. God gave man this earth to take care of. It's not yours, it is God's. And mankind has degeneration, man's thoughts of degeneration, man's lives have degenerated. We've totally changed so much of the animal kingdom to our pleasure, for our purposes, not God's purposes. We have destroyed our children's minds in schools that teach them, that brainwash them to believe that right is wrong and wrong is right. That's degeneration. That's not get better. The idea of America today is we put everybody on the level playing field, that everybody's going to be real good. That there won't be any outlaws anymore. The Democrats are trying to build up their voting force by letting all these illegal aliens come into this world. And these are illegal aliens. They're not migrants. They're illegal aliens. That means outlaws. That's what it means. It's illegal. But we make illegal legal and legal illegal because of the generation of thought and purpose. They're doing it for a reason, to try to build up their voting structure so they can stay in power and bring about their ideas, and their ideas that wrong is right and right is wrong. And that that a moral person is along now an immoral person or a white supremacist or something. They probably even have me down as a white supremacist. I'm only 1/32 white. And the rest of it's Indian. We will never get better. Mankind is on a steady slope down. Down, 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 down. God created hell for the devil and his angels. Muhammad said, if he really lived, somebody said it in his name, or whatever, that God loved to put men in hell and laughed as he threw each man in hell. That's not the God of the Bible, not the God of the world either, not the God of heaven. God doesn't want to put anybody in hell. God, you put yourself in hell, people. You put yourself in hell because of degeneration of thought and mind, morality and culture. Degeneration. Moses was a mediator between God and mankind. And through Moses we have an absolute strict law. But the law is not, in many ways, our friend, but our enemy. But it tells us what right and wrong is, even though we can't meet those standards, even though the Jews in his time thought that they had gone further than the law. And they put all of these other laws, 700 and something laws, that they were made besides these 10 laws. It's called the 10 words in Hebrew, the 10 words, the 10 edicts. We'll go into them later. But if you look into those 10 laws, you'll see that God wants the best for mankind. He wants the best for you and for me. But we always choose the wrong way. Mankind chooses the wrong way. Mankind is not escalating to get better and better. Mankind is becoming worse and worse. And in the last 2 years, if you can't see that, you're blind as a bat. And you don't have any radar either. The generation of the earth, the generation of the animal kingdom, and the generation of the human race in morality and maturity and in thought and in rejection of God. Atheism is a religion, people. Atheism is a religion. This culture that we lived in is this black culture. This black culture. The culture of evil and demons, unrighteousness, immorality, homosexuality, drugs, and alcoholism. This is not right. It's not okay. God says it's not okay. It's not me saying it's not okay. It's God. And when you go into that, then you go down, 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 degeneration, degeneration, degeneration. How many generations of welfare mamas have we got now? Since about the 1950s. How many generations of those living the same way?
Probably a lot farther.
Yeah. Is that acceleration? Is that getting better, or is it getting worse? Mothers and fathers using their children. Children using their mothers and fathers because they don't want to grow up. Degeneration. 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 Of thought and spirit and soul. Our Father, we send this message out. I pray that you use it throughout the world. Yes, we have degenerated. Yes, we have become a no people when we were a people of God. Father, help us to see this, to live it better, to be examples in the world. Father, please forgive me where I fail you. In Jesus' name I pray.